We have with us Dhruva Jaishankar. He's the Executive Director of ORF America. Thank you, Dhruv, for taking our time and speaking to DD India. We've seen a lot of discussions on both America's Indo-Pacific strategy and, to an extent, even the European Indo-Pacific strategy. It's been 2 years for the Americans and about a year and a half for the European Indo-Pacific strategy. What progress have we seen so far, and what more can we expect in the future?
So the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy has it was the first one done by this government in the U.S., the Biden administration. It follows the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Trump administration. There's actually been quite significant progress in a few areas. A lot of it has to do with the strategic relationships. So the U.S., Japan, and Korea held a historic summit in the U.S. A lot of trilateral cooperation that bridged a lot of the differences that had existed between Japan and Korea, and very concrete cooperation on defense and technology. The U.S.-Philippines relationship has really solidified in the last Vietnam as well. A lot of trade and defense cooperation between the U.S. and Vietnam. India, of course, is a highlight. ISET is the strategic technology dialogue. And that's actually translating, I mean, it's not just words, it's translating into cooperation on semiconductors, actual investments in areas. To give one example, on 5G and 6G cooperation and standards. Defense production in India, space cooperation. We'll see some actually major developments this year. So these are just some. Australia, AUKUS, US, UK, Australia cooperating on nuclear submarines and emerging technology. So if you look around from a strategic point of view, there's been considerable progress made in the last 2 years between the US and these key relationships. The one, I would say, and through the Quad as well, the one place where I think the US has not delivered as much as we expected is on the economic policy front. They released something called IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. And while they managed to get a lot of countries to sign on, and it was not going to be about reducing tariffs, it was not a trade agreement, but they haven't been able to make as much progress, partly because of resistance in the US, domestic political resistance.
Right. Also talking about the players in the Indo-Pacific region, I was hearing some of their concerns this morning, and they say that the area has turned into a geopolitical rallying point. Instead of focusing on sustainable development, we're focused on conflicts, and the need of the hour is to put in place infrastructure and other development needs of the countries which have seen both COVID and conflict, and now climate change is also going to impact them. While there has been investment, how do these concerns get addressed for the other players in the region?
I think one is geopolitics has become and economic development have become more closely intertwined. It's a reality today. When you look at China's dominance of supply chains, when you look at its lending practices, you look at its technological dominance in certain areas and how it's being leveraged for geopolitical purposes, it is this idea that you can divorce geopolitics and development today is proving very hard to sustain. And while that is a concern, particularly for smaller and more vulnerable economies, they would ideally not like to have that. The reality is this is the world we are in today. So that's one aspect of it. The second big question is who pays for it? It's very nice to talk about we need $6 trillion or whatever the amount is, very staggering amounts for infrastructure development to reach sustainable development goals. I think politically everyone agrees we need that to reach climate goals that, by the way, countries have agreed on already. These are not aspirational. These are what they've already agreed to. And secondly, SDG objectives, Sustainable Development Goal objectives. But who pays for it? It'll have to come from either the private sector, which will require changes to make it market friendly, make the market case for it. So one. In some cases that cannot be made, you require multilateral institutions to fund it. And there have been some attempts at empowering the World Bank, reforming the World Bank and empowering it so that it is able to do some of that. You're going to have regional development banks as well, AIIB, a Chinese-led initiative, but BRICS New Development Bank to some degree. There are the Asian Development Bank. So that there is a need to kickstart some of that, and the other is public financing, which is state to state. So India, I think people don't know, but India actually is extending quite a large. Not the amounts are not as significant always, but India is extending key grants and loans to vulnerable economies so that they can achieve some of these objectives and to have a catalyzing effect on them. So I think that's still a big problem. We can all want these nice things, but ultimately somebody will have to pay for it.
the West de-risking strategy or the decoupling strategy. You heard the Chinese foreign minister at the Munich Security Conference said it out loud that decoupling from China would backfire on the US. And how do you look at that statement at this current geo-economic scenario that we're living in, the vulnerabilities at this point? How do you see those statements coming from the Chinese side then?
No, I mean, it's a lot of bluster. I think and that's a message that's been sent for some time, that it'll be self-defeating to do that. But that if you buy into that, then you just end up continuing that dependence on China, which is what I think they want. I think that falls more and more on deaf ears, and I think people are realizing, at least in the major economies, other major economies, they're realizing that. They are finding that there is little upside to going along with China on these issues, and instead building up domestic resilience and domestic capacity is the need of the hour. Privately, my understanding is, Chinese leaders have communicated, even when they came to the U.S., but with others, that they're actually quite a bit more worried about their domestic economy than they let on publicly. So I think I would look at it as that. It would be more. It falls within a pattern of previous Chinese statements, and largely would be blustering.